Welcome to The Rise, the show that helps you break through to your next level of success in business and life from the inside out. I'm Sarah Cannell, 5-time best-selling author and 7-figure CEO of Thought Leader Academy, where we help coaches, experts, and entrepreneurs like you exponentially grow your impact and income by becoming best-selling authors, speakers, and industry leaders. Let's get ready to rise. Hello and welcome back to The Rise. You are in for a treat today because we have a special interview episode with the amazing Angela Duncan. I know once you hear a little bit about Angela's background, you'll think, wow, super impressed. Whoa. And we're going to have a very real conversation today because Angela and I, in different ways, have both risen ourselves, if you will, out of trauma, out of childhood neglect, out of having all kinds of experiences in the past to really wanted to bring Angela's story here today so you can see someone who can rise amongst any conditions and any beginnings and any origins. And that's a story we need to hear over and over, at least I do. So let me tell you a little bit about Angela and then we'll welcome her to the show. So Angela Duncan is a best-selling author. She is the founder of EmpowerHER Money. She has a top podcast, teaches podcasting. So we're all going to learn some great things today, and is a self-made multimillionaire. And those are some of the exciting summits that Angela has made. But here at The Rise, we're talking about really those milestones and getting granular about what it really takes on the inside, as well as strategically on the outside, to make a rise that not only lifts ourselves, but in Angela's case, you are such an example, Angela, of someone who brings others with you. And that's part of your mission. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today.
Well, this is something you do all the time. You interview people, and it's fun to get to, flip the tables and get to hear your story for our audience today. Angela, do you want to share a little bit about the beginning? We're going to drill in for this episode on a particular point in your life, a milestone, and your rise from that point. But you didn't start out in life. I'm sure no one was walking around with you as a little kid saying, you're going to be a multimillionaire and best-selling author and speaker. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where it started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start my story with, kind of what you touched on. I am a survivor of childhood abuse and poverty. I moved around more times than I could count, missed many days of school. I've lived in cars, parks, other people's houses. And I often tell that story, not because, I want you to feel sorry for me, but I really want the audience to understand that it doesn't matter what your childhood looked like. It doesn't matter where you are today. It doesn't matter where in that valley that you are, but you can make changes. And once you're kind of aware of where you came from and where those thoughts are coming from, then you become self-aware, and that's where the changes start to happen. So understanding that you can make a huge difference with some small action items starting today, starting tomorrow. That's what's important. It doesn't matter what was in the past because we can't change it. We can't control it. So let's focus on today and focus on the future.
I love this so much because a lot of the times our past becomes, we don't realize it's an excuse, but it definitely becomes a hindrance. I experienced really significant childhood trauma as well. And it was truly a blocker, not only for income and earning, which is a huge link that I've been doing research on now for the last couple of years, but the income is a byproduct, creating and manifesting, financial abundance, I believe that's an outcome of feeling a sense of wholeness, feeling a sense of empowerment, feeling a sense of personal agency. Is it safe to be visible? Is it safe to go for things? Is it safe to believe in ourselves, right? And when we have those experiences where that isn't what's reflected back to us and isn't what we physically experience, that can be an uphill battle. And so what would you credit, even though we're going to focus on a different point in your journey in a moment, but what do you think in terms of the very first step from you as that child who were moving around and sleeping in cars? What was that hinge moment that started you on a new path?
Yeah, I love that question. And you got to experience this activity, but this is an activity that I challenge people to do, whether or not you want to do it on your own, if you want to do it with some friends or family members, but to really think back to your childhood and jot down the ideas that were taught to you by someone outside of yourself, right? So what did your parents teach you? What did your friends, your grandparents, maybe it was an aunt, uncle, what was it about money and business or life in general that was taught to you? And so that first step of recognizing what those thoughts were and how they still show up in your life today, because you can't work on thoughts until you really do some of that deep work and go backwards to figure out what was it that I was taught, and then ask yourself, is that my truth today? And if it's not, then that's something you have to start working on. And it's just like a muscle. It's not like you're going to snap your fingers and one day you're going to stop thinking that way, right? It's work, but you have to put in the work to change that philosophy that your brain has been custom and has become your truth. You have to change it to a new truth. But in order for you to do that, you got to figure out what your brain is already telling you right now. And then we work on fixing it.
I love it. Well, we talk about the inner rise happens before the outer rise, right? And you're a living example of that. The narratives that we're running are what will play out in our life, whatever story we've got going on. And those are often unconsciously just taken on by the people and places and structures, organizations around us, right? So let's fast forward a little bit. You start working on yourself. You start changing. You said, this is what I was taught. And it sounds like, very quickly realized when you did that inventory, this isn't what my truth is, or at least I don't even want it to be. I even think we could, that's the fun part. We can just say, I don't like this. I don't want it to be my reality anymore. Okay. So you start doing that inner work. You get married, you're creating a life. Like take us to the moment when things started to change in the marriage. Cause at that point you changed a lot already.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, even though I had done that inner work, it wasn't enough. And when I say that, it means, I did do a little bit of it and then I'd stop. And then I do a little bit more and then I'd stop. And then I would think, oh, I'm okay. So I don't need to do this work anymore. But for me, it is going to be a lifelong journey. Coming from such a traumatic childhood, I know that I have to work on it all the time, and I'm going to have to do it for the rest of my life. But I didn't realize that until I was in my 30s and my marriage was starting to fall apart. And I really had to look at myself and determine, like, what is it that I'm telling myself? And so what I realized is I was allowing for someone else to tell my stories, for someone else to tell me, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, what I can do in life. And I started believing that truth instead of thinking for myself and believing my own truth. And so I think a lot of that still comes from that inner work that I just had stopped doing, and I wasn't really focusing on it. So when that marriage fell apart, I completely lost my identity. Like I didn't know who I was. We ran companies together, and I walked away from all of that in that entire life. And it was probably, the darkest moments for me was walking away from that marriage when I was not happy and when he was not happy, and figuring out what was it that I was doing wrong? Who was I in that moment that I was not happy with? Because I can't be happy in the marriage if I'm not happy with myself. And I definitely wasn't happy with myself. And so that dark period gave me some time to reflect and to realize truly that I have to keep doing this work. It's never going to stop for me. And it's something that I'm always going to be working on if I want to be that better version of myself. And so that was the work that I had to put in to rise to get to the other side again.
Angela, I love this because it's the diet versus lifestyle mentality. And I've had that in even working on generating a business. And I would say, I can kind of sprint to create this result. And then I'd want to just go, I don't want to do anything. And then realize, well, where's the flow of the business? What have I been doing for business development? Well, nothing, because so I really hear what you're saying. I think it can apply to many people listening in many areas where have we not been consistent? Where have we done something as a diet, not a lifestyle? And Angela, because I know I'm curious, so I'm guessing others listening are as well. What form did that work take? When you say working on yourself, like I know for myself, I meditate every day. I do many different mindset modalities, NLP, EFT. I have a lot of tools in the toolbox, right? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, both inner and external. So for the inner work, for me, it's the way that I start my day. I'm not naturally a positive person, but I want to be. Like, I want to be that shining light. I want to be around people, and I want people to just feel that energy, because I truly believe when you're a positive person, that people will start to listen to you. So if my true goal in life is to teach women about money, well, they're not going to listen to me if I'm negative all the time. So I start my day intentionally. I do journaling. I talk, I don't talk, but I do write down in my journal about, what am I grateful for? And sometimes people laugh at me when I'm like, oh, thank you, house, because you know what? There's people who don't have houses. And when I was a kid, I didn't have a house. So I'm grateful for like just the little things in my life that I've been able to accomplish. And that way when I'm starting my day with that positive attitude and I'm writing down what I'm grateful for, it's very hard for the rest of the day to kind of take over or to have that negativity come in when I start intentionally like that. But I'm also the same way in the evening. And I love to share the story too, because I don't have Netflix or Hulu or any of those things. I don't watch the news at all. I quite frankly have no idea what's going on in the world. And people will say, "Oh, did you hear about this?" I'm like, "Nope, don't know what that is." Unless I can control it or affects me, I don't really need to know right now. So at the end of the day, I turn on my free YouTube and I watch funny videos, because if
Yes.
I can control the first part and the end of my day, whatever happens in the middle, I'm hopefully just going to roll with it, but I'm working on this every day. So that's the
Mm.
internal work. And the externals, I'm always going to have a coach. Whatever it is that I'm struggling with in my life right now, I'm going to find an expert and I'm going to have them help me. So when I went through the divorce and trying to figure out internally what was going on, I definitely needed an NLP coach. I needed to figure out what in my childhood was still showing up right now, that I was repeating that pattern, that I had to break, that I had to overcome that challenge so that I can be a better version of myself for hopefully, maybe I get married again someday, but I want to be a better version of myself for my daughter and for everyone around me. But I needed that exterior work too, that someone can kind of look at and say, okay, what is this doing? What does this pattern mean? And how do we break it? And you definitely need help to do that too.
Yeah, I've seen a complete correlation between investing. I have an NLP coach. Again, I've had an EFT coach. I've done EMD. I mean, a lot of these modalities, which all essentially get us to, like you said, we can do all the conscious work we want, but if the subconscious patterns are still entrenched in lack, limitation, unworthiness, poverty, PTSD, sort of I'm not safe, then it's a really like climbing up the mountain with bricks in the backpack, and it's very hard, and or we won't make it, right? So I love that you are a lifelong, climber in this, like you're committed. So let's talk about this. You leave this marriage, your marriage, ends. You owned businesses together, your professional life, your identity is tied into that. You start realizing this inner external work on myself gets to be a constant. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
What then happened on the outside? So let's talk about, like, do you have something around like the first million you made on your own, or like what, like tell us about a moment after that dark period.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was carrying with me, and I don't feel like, my ex said this with bad intentions, but one of the things he had said is you will never be successful growing companies on your own, because he and I did it together. And so I
Mm.
had to overcome that belief. But the only way that I could do it, and it could be different for many people, is I was going to prove to myself that I could. So I launched an insurance company, and within a couple years, it was a top performing insurance company, but it wasn't something that I truly loved doing. And I knew I wasn't being the leader that I needed to be, because as we ran businesses together, there were some things that I still needed to work on that I knew wasn't there. So I wasn't the greatest leader, even though we were growing this incredible company. I had decided, when one of my employees decided to move on to another company, that I wasn't in the right place. But I had done what I needed to do, which was grow a company on my own, and it was successful to me. And so then I sold that company. I successfully exited. We did a creative financing deal, which I learned a lot about. And so I was able to exit that company and then do what I do now, which is, Empower Her Money podcast, where I get to interview amazing women like you, and we share stories. We talk about money and business. And this is my world. Like, I love teaching about money. And if I can help, reach more people by sharing other stories that you can relate to, then this is like my passion project now. So I'm excited to got to this point, but I did need to prove that to myself so that I could get to that next level and that next breakthrough.
I want everyone listening to think of something you've been told you can't do. Probably some of you listening have done what Angela's done, which is, instead of taking that on and saying, oh, I guess I can't, because I've been the person who listened to that external authority figure type of, mandate, and then took it on as my truth, because I gave my power away. Right. What I love that you did, Angela, and I want let's all join together in, if there is still something that someone outside you told you you can't do, or you won't be good at, or whatever it is, let's take that on. I want that to be the gift, one of the many gifts, Angela, of hearing your story today. What's rising in me is the let's look if any of that is still in there for any of us. Is there something we're still letting ourselves believe, a limiting idea? Because Angela, what I hear in your story is the watch me effect, which is what I call, it's like, oh yeah, you can't build a successful company on your own, watch me. And then you did. And then you realized, oh, it isn't my ultimate passion, which now you've done your rise to the work of your soul, your calling, right? That's my experience of you. We met because you're willing to be visible in this movement around women and empowerment and business. You came and spoke at an event. I was attending the event. We connected. We're here now. And so let's talk a little bit about Empower Her Money. So what is like your hope as more people hear the podcast and experience your work and listen to these conversations? What's the change in the world that you're about creating?
Yeah. So kind of two steps. So the first one definitely is to reach women that, I think about my mom. Perhaps if she had better financial education when I was a kid, she would have made different choices and I wouldn't have had to live the life that I did. She always said she felt stuck because she didn't have money. Well, that's awful. Like to have someone stuck in a situation being abused, having children being abused because you don't have money, granted that can be excuses, but if you truly want to make a change, now you've got so much information. YouTube is free. Podcasting is free. So trying to figure out how to reach those women so that they don't feel stuck and so that maybe I can stop another child from going through what I had to do. That truly is what I want to impact. And two, since I've been in the podcasting world, and I know you understand this too, this is like an untapped market for so many business owners. Like they should be on podcasts, whether they launch their own or go on other people. There's so many people listening to podcasts. And I think that the more that technology comes, the more people are going to be listening to podcasts over like news or regular TV because they get tired of all the commercials and stuff. So teaching other business owners now how to use this platform to be the expert, to generate more leads, to get in front of an audience that is educated and usually higher income earners, which is most people's avatars if they are in business, so two sides. I love the podcast from teaching perspective and meeting people, but also now I'm going to help other business owners and teach them how to use this platform to create income for their business.
Yeah. So we're going to put in the show notes. Obviously, you'll have a link to Angela's wonderful podcast. You can go listen and subscribe. Also, because Angela, you are, now a leading expert in teaching people about really more than just, it's a little bit like me with books. I help people, people say, oh, I'm going to put a book up on Amazon. I'm like, hope it does something. It's like, that's not going to make the impact you want, right? There's a whole strategy. There are funnels. There are ways that the book opens doors to speaking and all kinds. What would be something so that people get an understanding of you have much more of a strategic mind on podcasting? Like, is there one tip that you would want to give people listening who do have a podcast or those who are going to start a podcast that they can tide them over until they get over to your site? What should we all be thinking about in 2024 in terms of podcasts?
Yeah. So I'm a detail person. So I want to lay out my plan first instead of just winging it. Because if you know anything about podcasting and the way that podcast gets ranked or it shows up in searches, is you have to have consistency. You have to have great audio. If you're going to do video, do a great camera, and making sure that the guests that you put on your podcast align with what you're trying to teach on your podcast, because you want to be that expert. And so also having solo episodes, super important, but put a plan in place. It's just like anything else. Like if you're going to launch a business, you have a plan. If you're going to buy a house, you need to have a plan. So podcast is a business and you have to treat it as such. And so you want to make sure you have a great plan before you launch the podcast so that you are. I mean, time is like our most valuable asset, right? We don't get it back. So why are you wasting time on something that's not going to produce what you want it to produce?
I think it's so smart. And your point about, my husband's in the television documentary, industry, TV and film. And I overhear lots of the, the Zooms and stuff, just we both have home offices. And, the thing that's making all the networks sweat in their shoes right now is because people prefer podcasts. They prefer YouTube TV. They prefer the non-commercial, non-network in many ways. And it used to be, of course they could sell these big advertising buys on the networks because, that's where the eyeballs are. And it's changed so so dramatically and it's going to keep changing. So I think this is such an exciting time, Angela, for you to be a pioneer and a leader, especially a lot of the people teaching podcasting are men. I'm just saying. So it's wonderful to have, you here at the forefront. So everybody go over, look in the show notes, go over and check out Empower Her Money. Find Angela's teachings. If those of you that are going to start your podcast or you have one, to create a plan. And so I'm going to pull 2 RISE action steps, Angela, if I may, and then you add anything I forget that you think is important before we go. The first is everybody think about if there is something where someone has told you couldn't and you still haven't. And just even writing it down and seeing that that was put on you. That's not your truth. That was someone's opinion, misguided. Maybe it wasn't intentional, doesn't matter, but it wasn't true. And what's one thing you could do to prove it wrong? You know what I mean? Like, what's one action step, even if it feels like a baby action step? If someone said you're not a good public speaker, can you just go and do a 1-minute Instagram live today? If someone says you can't write, because I get people with writing trauma all the time, like, my 3rd grade teacher didn't like my writing. I can't write a book. And they write award-winning, phenomenal, beautiful, best-selling books. It's all a lie. But let's all look and make sure, is there anything still on us about someone said something that we can't do, that we haven't done? And then what's one action step we can take towards that in honor of, Angela, your courage and your rise that you've shared with us today? Then those of you doing a podcast, do you have a plan? Do you have a plan? And it's okay if you started one and didn't, make one now. Right? Like, today's a new beginning. Every breath is a new beginning. And so let's take a really powerful inner action and an outer action. Angela, anything else everybody needs to know before we conclude?
I'm so inspired by you right now. So I have a checklist. I call it the ultimate podcast checklist, and I use it for my clients. But what I want to do for you today and for anyone listening is, if they follow me on Empower Her Money on Instagram and just send me a message and say RISE, so I know that you're coming from here, because I don't want to give this away to everyone, because I have spent a lot of time on this checklist to make sure my clients follow it. But I'm going to give them the checklist for free. So at least they have a plan in place, and it can give them some ideas that maybe they're not thinking about, either on their own podcast that they're launching, or if they've already launched it. I'm going to give you my checklist just because I want more people to use this platform so that we can make sure we're reaching more people with our branding, with our messaging, with our products. So it'll be free.
Incredible. Angela, thank you for your generosity. Are you the luckiest people, right? Like, we get, think of this abundance and paying it forward. Angela, it is such an honor. I knew the minute I met you that it was an honor to know you, to hear your story, that I wanted to know you further, and so grateful that you made time for us today to share with the audience here at The Rise. Again, everyone will have all those. You've got to message Angela, though. You've got to go over and message her the word RISE so you can get that podcast checklist. Come follow and subscribe to Angela's show, of course, and subscribe to this show if you haven't already. We're so thrilled to all take action together. Let's link arms, take an action toward that watch me vision, and let's start spreading the word even bigger. We'll see you all next time. I am beyond honored that you choose to spend your precious time here. And I'm guessing that, like me, you believe everyone deserves to rise. So to keep this content absolutely free to absolutely everyone, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to the show and share this episode with a friend. We'll be the rising tide that raises all ships. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into Empower Her Money podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast, and leave a review wherever you are tuning in.